This video gives a short introduction to Rudolf Steiner's picture of the threefold human being. First, I'm going to start with a story. Many years ago, a poor farmer and his wife were struggling to survive, so the farmer decided to leave home to find a better job. Before setting off, he told his wife, "I may be gone for a long time, but I will always remain faithful to you. Will you promise me the same?" "Yes, I will wait for you, and I will always be faithful to you," she promised. After many days of walking, the man came to a small town and found a job. He asked his boss to save all of his wages until he was ready to return home. 20 years later, the man told his boss, "It's time for me to leave. Please give me the money that I have earned." The boss said, "You have worked hard and earned a large sum of money. However, I want to make you an offer. Either take the money, or I will give you 3 pieces of advice. Think it over before giving me an answer." The man pondered it for 2 days. Then he told his boss, "I've decided to take your 3 pieces of advice." "Very well," said his boss. "Here they are. First, never take shortcuts, for you never know where they will lead. Secondly, never be too curious, for curiosity can be a dangerous thing. And thirdly, never make decisions in moments of anger or pain, or you may do something you regret." Then the boss gave him 3 large loaves of bread for his journey, saying, "Save the 3rd one to eat with your wife when you get home." So the farmer went on his way, and, to cut a long story short, on his way back, the first piece of advice saved him from taking a shortcut that would have led him to a band of murderous robbers. When taking shelter in a small village, the second piece of advice saved his life when he heard screams in the night. A tiger was terrorizing the village, but the man kept his door shut despite his curiosity. Then the farmer continued his long journey, and after many days and nights of walking, he finally saw his house. It was night time, and he was delighted to see the shape of his wife through the window. But then he saw that she was not alone. Through the window he saw that there was a man with her, and she was softly caressing his hair. His heart was immediately filled with so much anger and bitterness that he was ready to rush in and kill both of them. However, he took a deep breath and he remembered the 3rd piece of advice: never make decisions in moments of anger or pain. So he took a deep breath and decided to sleep outside and decide what to do in the morning. In the morning he was calmer and said to himself, "I will not kill my wife and her lover. I am going back to my boss and ask him to take me back. But before I do, I want to tell my wife that I have always been faithful to her." So he went to the door and knocked. When his wife opened the door, she cried and embraced him warmly. He tried to push her away, but he was not able to. Then, with tears in his eyes, he told her, "I was faithful to you and you betrayed me." She was shocked with that accusation and swore that she had been faithful to him for 20 years. Then he asked, "So who was that man you were caressing last night?" And she said, "That man is our son. When you left, I discovered I was pregnant. Today, he is 20 years old." Hearing that, the man asked for her forgiveness. He hugged her and his son, and then they sat down, and he told her all about what had happened and the good advice that his boss had given him. His wife said, "Well, I am sad about the money, but without that good advice you would have been killed, or else you would have murdered me and our son." Then the farmer took out the last loaf of bread to share with them. After blessing the bread, he broke it and started to share it. But then he was amazed to find that hidden inside the loaf was all the money he had earned for his 20 years of hard work, and even some extra. We'll come back to that story later. But first, let's look at the most physical, the most mineral part of the human being, the skeleton. When we look at the skeleton, we can see three different main forms or shapes. The round skull, the curved rib cage, and the straight limbs. The skull is a rounded form and is mostly enclosed. Young children draw the head as a circle, and we can almost think of the skull as a sphere. The rib cage is partially enclosed, protecting the vital organs inside, but it is very flexible so that it can expand and contract with the breath, and it is partially open at the front at the bottom. The bones of the limbs radiate out in straight lines. We can imagine these lines reaching to infinity. Within these three forms, three different activities take place. Within the skull is housed our brain, the organ that receives sense impressions from the outside world and is the vehicle for our thinking. Working with our brain is the nerve sense system that receives sense impressions and sends out messages throughout the body. The rib cage protects the heart and lungs, our rhythmic system. It expands as the lungs inflate with air as we breathe, and the heart beats rhythmically, 4 beats to each breath on average. When we exert ourselves or experience intense emotion, the rhythmic system works faster. When we relax, it slows. Our limbs carry our body and enable us to move, work, and make an impact on the outside world. So even in the form of the human body, we can see 3 activities. And these, whilst they are connected to the physical body, are not actually visible except through their effects. These are the 3 soul forces: thinking, feeling, and willing. This is often referred to as head, heart, and hand in that nifty Steiner education soundbite. Steiner likened these 3 activities to the sun, moon, and stars, describing the complete sphere of the head as the sun, the open crescent of the ribcage as the moon, and the raying activity of the limbs reaching to the stars. As human beings, we experience 3 states of consciousness: being awake, being asleep, and dreaming, which is somewhere between the 2. We could call this conscious, unconscious, and subconscious. In our thinking, in the complete physical sphere of our head, we are conscious. We are aware of what is happening and paying close attention to it. We are present and we are awake in our body. If I stop now and ask you, how are you feeling? Are you fully aware? How often in a check-in do people say something vague like, "I'm okay," because they are not fully aware of what they are feeling? Trying to work out how you're feeling can sometimes feel a bit like trying to remember a dream. Our feelings influence us all the time, but we are not fully aware of them. Our heart and lungs are working all the time, and we can tune into their rhythm, but we're usually too busy thinking about something else. As for our will, this is the most mysterious. Usually what people talk about as will isn't. In our will, we are asleep. I can see a pen on the floor and think, "I'll pick that up." We are aware of picking up the pen, but completely unaware of all the nerve impulses, muscle movements, balance adjustments, etc. that are involved in picking up the pen. If we had to consciously tell our body to do everything needed to pick up a pen, every floor would be totally covered in pens because we just couldn't do it. Our metabolic system, the digestion and so on, also lies within the realm of will. Mercifully, we are completely asleep to all of its activity. I really don't want to be conscious of what the stomach is doing with all that acid, thank you very much. Only when something goes wrong do we become conscious of it. Think about heartburn, for instance. So let's go back to our story, the ending in particular. When the farmer comes home, first he sees his wife through the window. He perceives, receives the sense impression, becomes conscious of his wife in his thinking. He is filled then with love, enthusiasm and so on, in his feeling, and his will impulse is to rush up to her. Then, however, he perceives something else, another man. He is overcome with feelings of rage and his impulse is to kill. Now, it could go one of two ways. His feeling could fire his will impulse, he could rush in and kill them both, and with any luck, get off with diminished responsibility, which, interestingly, is a legal recognition that we can become so overcome by feeling that we become unconscious of our actions. Fortunately, however, his feeling stimulates his thinking. He becomes conscious that he is feeling anger and remembers the third piece of advice. Also, it has to be said that his ego or human consciousness is stepping in here to save him from the passions of his astral body. He decides to sleep on it. Thinking, feeling and willing is often depicted as a lemniscate in which conscious thinking is shown in polarity with unconscious willing, with a semi-conscious feeling mediating between them. This can go the other way too. There are accounts of people who unconsciously do things that are normally impossible, driven by intense feeling, such as lifting up a car to save a child. This is called hysterical strength. If they'd stopped to think about it, it never would have happened. So this is our introduction to the threefold human being and thinking, feeling and willing. And in our next video, we'll look at Steiner's model of the 7-year phases and how these things are linked and how this informs the way that we teach in a Steiner school.